entire bio, and subject today is Pia. By the way, I'd like to introduce them as Mr. and Mrs. Sunshine. So today we have Mrs. Sunshine speaking. As Pia Aitken, and why organic. She'll discuss her background with organic farming and gardening, and give compelling arguments for growing, buying, and eating organic based on medical and environmental studies and worldwide corporate agribusiness concerns. Barbara Harwood, also known as Pia Aitken, is retired from the faculty of the Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture, where she taught sustainable architecture, specializing in indoor air quality in buildings and passive solar, energy efficient design and construction. And during the 80s and 90s, she founded and was CEO of 2 companies in Dallas, one of which designed and built low-income housing and rehabbed and owned low-income apartments, and another which built custom solar homes. You can see a little bit of tie-in with some of the interests of her husband, perhaps. She has been on several national boards and commissions, appointed by 3 presidents. Her book, The Healing House, was a bestseller and is still available on Amazon. Now we'll hear how she first heard about organic farming at the age of 8, and it became a lifelong passion. So please welcome Pia. No, Pia, I'm sorry. I forgot something. I forgot the meditation. Yeah, Kat?
Okay, that's okay. You don't have to introduce me again. It's fine.
Promise?
I promise.
Okay. I'm sorry, Kat. Let me get this on. I don't follow instructions well.
Good morning, everyone. This morning's meditation is actually going to be a contemplation by way of invitation. So instead of trying to get as still and quiet as possible, you're going to let the words just bathe through you and see what they mean to you and be with them. And then you can be with them later also. I have stolen this, I have borrowed this from brothers David Stendhal Roth, and I've chopped it up and made it my own. So I apologize to him if there's anything wrong with this. We think this is just another day in our life. It's not just another day. We will never live it again. It is given to us. It's a gift. And the only appropriate response is gratefulness. If we do nothing else but cultivate that response to the great gift of this unique day, if we learn to respond as if this were the first day of our life, and if it were the very last day of our life, then we will have spent this day very well. We can begin by looking at the faces of the people we see. Each one has an incredible story behind their face, a story we can never fully fathom. Not only their story, but the story of their ancestors. And in this present moment, on this day, all the people we meet and sit by, all miraculously flows together here and meets us like a life-giving water, if we will only open our heart and drink. Let us open our heart to all that the earth home gives us, setting aside our thoughts that bring separation, and rejoice in the sun that warms us, the air that we breathe, the fresh water we drink, the lettuce that nourishes our bodies, the beauty that inspires our souls, the land we live on, our fellow inhabitants, the spider and hippopotamus, the wondrous lake in front of us, the miracle of life in us as us. These are just a few of an enormous number of gifts to which we can open our heart. Let us open our heart to all the blessings and let them flow through us so that everyone we meet on this day will be blessed by us, just by our eyes and our smile by our touch, by our presence. Let the gratefulness overflow into blessing all around us. Then it will be a really good day.
Go for it.
Should have worn a better dress for hooking on a microphone. Oh, here we go. Did you notice that every single thing she talked about was the natural organic world? All the things we're thankful for are the lake and the air and the lettuce we eat. All those things are related to the organic world. They're related to the reason I'm so passionate about organic. I started, after they asked me to talk about organic at the Women's Forum, I started trying to figure out when first I thought about being sort of organic. And I think it was my grandfather that started this. I realized that really some philosopher named Rudolf Steiner gave a series of lectures in Silesia in 1924 when he talked about the coordination of all living things, holistic living, and as part of that he thought we should have something called biodynamic agriculture. He was not an agriculturist, and the idea eventually bloomed into merge with organic. But at the moment I was 8 years old, I'd never heard of this guy, and my grandfather had never heard of organic. But he put me in the front of his pickup truck and drove me around to his safflower fields and his soybean fields and his wheat fields. And I sat on the cracked leather seat with my legs dangling up in the air. And I would say, Grandpa, why is that piece fallow? Big word I learned from the grown-ups. Why is that piece fallow when you're farming that piece? He said, so that the straw or plant remains we folded into it at the end of the year, we plowed under, has time to rot and turn into nitrogen in the soil. What's nitrogen? It's something that is created by lightning and comes down in rain onto the fields, or it's created by rotting plant matter, and it makes the new plants grow better. Oh. One of the basic elements of life on the farm was a garden. So Grandpa also had a garden. And he had a long tin sprayer with a black handle and a can on the end. And he would fill the can with soapy water. And I said, Grandpa, why are you putting soap in the water you spray on the tomatoes? To keep the bugs off, he said. Well, why does soap keep the bugs off? Would you like to eat soap? No. And I remembered all the times my mother washed my mouth out with soap for saying no to her. So when my father took over the farm from Grandpa, he farmed exactly the same way, leaving the land fallow in alternate years, using soap and water on the vegetable garden. And then in that way that life has of making pieces that eventually form a whole puzzle picture, I had a little boy about 2 years old and a baby in a baby seat on the porch, and a wasp came sniffing around my child, and my little boy's, Mommy, a wasp around baby. So I said, just a minute. I ran in the garage, got the raid can, came out and zapped the wasp. I watched the wasp. I sprayed him about here. I watched him fold up in the air and die and fall to the ground. Then I felt my finger was wet from that raid, and I knew my finger had skin that's living tissue that's absorbent, and this poison was so toxic it killed something with living tissue in a half a second. And I thought, oh my God, I am poisoning myself. The next time I ran, it was to the sink to get soap and water, and I washed off my finger. And on the way, I threw the raid can in the trash, and I've never used insecticide since. That was my epiphany. If anything is that toxic to living tissue, it does not belong around me or my children. Oops, are we there? It does not belong around me or my children. I stopped using pesticides everywhere then, and I have never again used them. I sought alternatives. I experimented with different things to see how they worked. And at that time, in the 60s, not too many people were doing this, so it was quite an experiment. But I got to the point where many years later, when I founded my companies, one of the immutable rules that we had in my company, along with you never tell a lie, and it doesn't matter if you make a mistake, you come to me and tell me the truth, and it's fine, just don't lie about it. One of the immutable rules was no pesticides. We don't use them. And it was a challenge because we had low-income apartments. We had low-income people. We had to teach those people what to do instead. And we had to teach them why they had to do it. They had to use discipline in their lives to do this in order not to poison their children. And it worked. One of my most horrible memories of pesticides was I was looking at an apartment in Dallas to buy, which we would retrofit and then sell. And when I walked into one of the apartments they were going to show me, there was a Mexican man with a tank on his back and the wand, and he was spraying. There was a carpet, playpen in the corner, toys all over the floor, and he was spraying just like this, everywhere, all around that apartment. On the porch was sitting this young black mother and her baby. And I said, when are you going back in there? She said, oh, he said we could just stay out here until he was finished. I said, when you go back in, wash every toy, wash every bit of clothing in that playpen because your baby's going to get poisoned, and don't let the baby play on the floor. And she just stared at me with these big eyes. She had never heard anything like that in her life. But I was absolutely horrified by this. And of course I did buy that apartment, and almost like without reason, just get that guy out of here. Just, I'm buying this place, just get him out of here right now. So, not one of my better purchases you can imagine. So, imagine my consternation when in 1991, after my dad died, I got a phone call from a farmer in Nebraska who the trustees for my dad's trust had hired to farm the land. It was 2,000 acres. He knew that my brother and I couldn't do this, at that point anyway. So he hired these trustees who hired this guy, and the guy said, I'm going to do pesticides and herbicides in a couple of weeks. I need you to pay for half. There was silence on my end, I'm sure, for ages. And finally I said, excuse me? Pesticides and herbicides? I've never used those in my life. My grandfather and my father never used them, and we're not starting now. He said, oh yes we are, because I've been hired to farm this land. It's now as if it's mine, and we're going to do this, and you have to pay half. Well, you can imagine what the rest of that conversation was like. It took me 2 years in court to get rid of those trustees, and 3 more years to get rid of those farmers, because you have to give farm lessees 3 years notice in Nebraska. So 5 years later, I found a childhood friend who worked with me to do organic. He's still farming it. We cleaned it up. We had to go through the process that you have to go through with organic certification of purifying the land for 3 years. We planted green manure on it and all those things. And at the end, we're certified organic, and we're still certified organic, and we now raise hardwood red winter wheat that sells for organic. So I am a certified organic farmer. And I tell you all that so you know, I didn't just climb on the bandwagon of organic when I hit Ajijic 6 years ago and found Wendy Hill and Marie Pruden out at Aka trying to grow organic vegetables, struggling like I've never seen. They were heroes of mine, they still are. They were selling it to local restaurants. They were training the farmers around the lake, not only to do lettuce and greens, but they were raising turkeys and sharing the baby turkeys with families. They were doing all kinds of really wonderful things. And I was completely sold on that idea. I think one of the basic things we have to do is buy organic so that we can keep farmers growing it, so that we can keep pesticides out of the lake. And we'll get more into that in a minute. But you can tell I'm slightly passionate about this. And I'm still passionate. My husband and I have an organic garden and an organic fruit orchard behind our all-solar house. And it's not too easy, but in one of those ironic twists of life, wasps have ended up being our best friends in the garden. I was standing by my broccoli leaves about 3 years ago, and I was seeing this pathetic leaf, and on it were these little green worms called gusanos. Everybody's shaking their heads in agreement. So I see this 747 wasp headed for me. You know, these big long ones with the long legs, and they're amazing. He was coming towards me, and I just stood and waited. He wasn't even the least bit interested in me. He saw that green worm. He didn't even land on the leaf. He just reached down with his front arms, picked that thing up, and started chomping on it and flew away, flying lunch. And that was the end of my gusanos in my garden. So I'm very grateful for wasps indeed. Now, I'm not the only person who ever observed all this, obviously. Many of you in the room have. I think the most interesting case of somebody who saw this was a diligent young woman investigator armed with a master's in zoology from Johns Hopkins University, who had an inkling that there was something going on like this with pesticides. So she got a network of scientists and doctors and conservationists and government officials, and a couple of people that had worked for pesticide companies and a couple of whistleblowers, and she interviewed them all. She began writing a book. I went away. There we are. She began writing a book. She had become interested in the harmful effects of pesticides and DDT in particular. When, as a marine biologist at the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries, she intuitively felt there was a link between cancer and human exposure to pesticides. In late 1949, she wrote to her publisher, quote, "In the beginning, I felt the link between pesticides and cancer was tenuous and at best circumstantial. Now I feel it's very strong indeed," end quote. She continued her work, and she said she was digging deep into the realms of physiology, biochemistry, and genetics, and she finally began to feel a lot of pieces falling into place. So at the end of that process, she knew that tackling that subject, when pesticides were very new and the pesticide industry was young and booming, was like trying to catch a tiger by the tail. But she wrote to a friend, "Knowing what I do, there will be no future peace for me if I keep quiet." In early 1962, 50 years ago now, she sent her manuscript to Houghton Mifflin and the New Yorker magazine, where it was serialized. Her name was Rachel Carson. Her book was Silent Spring. Early in her book, she asked, how could intelligent beings seek to control a few unwanted insect species by a method that contaminated the entire environment and brought the threat of disease and death even to their own kind? That's still the most profound question we ask about pesticides. This book created a sensation. It caused President Kennedy to establish a commission to look at pesticides and eventually to oversee and regulate some of them. And yes, there was hot backlash. This is my favorite one. A biochemist with the American Cyanamid called Carson, quote, "a fanatic defender of the cult of the balance of nature." Do you love it? And chemical companies called her a communist. Rachel Carson died 2 years later of metastasized breast cancer. But she left a powerful legacy. She left me and millions of other people like me defending the cult of the balance of nature. Studying and learning not only about bugs, but what you do when you don't use chemicals, and how to reach that ideal in a very crowded world. So why am I still so passionate about this? Because scientists have really studied these issues and really confirmed the things that she thought were happening. So pesticides are toxic to humans. What is it exactly about pesticides that are so bad? Well, they're a class of chemicals called organochlorines, various combinations of hydrocarbons, that's petroleum, basically, from under the earth, and chlorine. They're stubbornly persistent in the environment. They don't break down naturally for decades. They're used in all sorts of chemical products: paints, cleaners, mothballs, nail polish, solvents, gasoline. Not exactly the kind of chemicals you'd want to eat. And yet they're also used in pesticides, and they're sprayed on fruits and vegetables. And if you don't eat organic, you eat them every time you eat anything. And what do they do to your body that's so bad? Well, first of all, organochlorines are neurotoxins. That's why that wasp curled up and dropped to the ground instantly, because it instantly paralyzes the nervous system. So what have those neurotoxins been shown to do? Well, first of all, they've been linked to neurobiological problems in children, because as neurotoxins, they alter the function of the brain and thus affect thought and intelligence. This effect is particularly acute in fetuses, according to a study by Dr. Ken Spaeth at New York University. A 2010 Harvard study found that children with organochlorine pesticide breakdown materials in their urine were far more likely to have ADHD than those without residues. In addition to their neurobiological attack, organochlorines are also hormone mimickers. That is, they fool the body into thinking you've taken estrogen, progesterone, or testosterone. So if you, for example, have a genetic predisposition to one of those cancers that are hormone cancers, breast, ovarian, or prostate, and that we know now that does run in families. If you have a tendency to that, those chemicals in your body make it more likely that you will get that cancer. And if you get that cancer, those chemicals in your body make it more likely that you will die of it because it will grow faster and be less controllable. So these chemicals clearly react with and disrupt sexual hormones. Hormone disruption is also linked to obesity because it creates something called metabolic syndrome as it accumulates in your cells. And that was a study done in 2012. There are also published links between pesticides and Parkinson's disease, done 10 years ago in Wisconsin among farmers. And they're particularly shown to affect infertility. And that's in relation to atrazine, the pesticide used ubiquitously on corn in the Midwest. If you want to do something really interesting and kind of horrifying, Google atrazine, and it sounds just like, it's spelled just like it sounds, A-T-R-A-Z-I-N-E. Google map atrazine and look at its use. You will see red dots absolutely clustered in eastern Nebraska, Iowa, southern Minnesota, that area. Corn is just soaked in atrazine. And you know where that goes. After it's soaked in atrazine, where does it go? From rain down into the groundwater. And where does that go? Into the rivers, and it goes into what people eventually drink. Research on environmental pesticides, that is those pesticides that are washed into water from farming, are shown to bioaccumulate in mother's milk. So looking around here, not too many of you will be involved in growing fetuses or in nursing babies. But we are at an age where hereditary cancers are beginning to rear their ugly heads. So if you don't want to get breast, ovarian, and prostate cancers, the fewer chemicals you feed them, feed your bodies, the better off you are. So there's one good reason for eating organic. Now, I need a drink of water. Could you hand me my blue bottle? That's okay. I forgot. I can open it. Thank you. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Stanford study. How many of you have seen this, the headlines on the Stanford study on organic? Actually, I think I'm glad because what happened, it became controversial only because the reporters who read the study only read the first paragraph before they made the headline. Then they wrote the headline, and so the headline said, "Study sees no nutritional advantage in organics." Did somebody miss the point or what? You know, could it be that maybe they should have read a little farther and read where it says, detectable pesticide residue was found in 38% of conventional produce and 7% of organic. And then I said, 7%? Ah! So how did the pesticides end up in the organic food? The lead author of this study of studies, it was actually, Stanford took 10 years of studies of organic food and their health effects and put them all together in this major Stanford study. So the lead author said it could be long-lasting, now banned pesticides still in the soil, aka Rachel Carson, or it could be drift spraying from nearby fields. Even when they're banned or forbidden by law, some of those chemicals still end up in us. So another reason to eat organic is some of the letters that came into all the newspapers after they printed these wrong headlines. And I gleaned some of these letters out because they were very interesting. Most of the writers of these letters, I would say almost 100%, said we buy organic to avoid pesticides. They got the point wrong. But we end up eating them and loving them because of the taste. They're so much better than the cardboard tomatoes and cardboard cucumbers that you buy that are conventional. Then a number of doctors responded to that. One doctor said, quote, even low levels of pesticides can hurt us, since many environmental pollutants cause harm at levels below government safety thresholds. Until we have sufficient research on their safety, reducing the body's burden of pesticides and other pollutants is a reasonable goal, end quote. Another doctor who wrote noted that 2 of the studies, including the one I mentioned about at Harvard in 2010, reported significantly lower urinary pesticide levels among children consuming organic versus conventional diets, and it confirmed fewer antibiotic residues and less antibiotic-resistant bacteria in organic meats, end quote. So those doctors were looking at things that the study should have had as headlines. Now the really good news here at Lakeside is that we have an organic farmers market every Tuesday morning, and we are just about to give birth to, or Greg Oaks is about to give birth to, Green Go, which is an organic greenhouse. Organic greenhouse west of town, about 3 kilometers. And he's going to open it up on January 1st for people to buy an interest in it and come and get your own organic lettuce, spinach, he's got 53 varieties of greens. So you can all join that for, I think, probably low fee, and then come and buy greens every week, pick your own greens. I think that's so fabulous. So I know that the Organic Farmers Market has those, but there's literally like the Walmart battle at the tables of the people that have greens. You have to be there at exactly 10, and at 10:03 all the spinach is gone. At 10:04 all the chard's gone. At 10:05 all the spinach is gone. So it'll be great to have Greg's greens as well. At the organic market, they also have fresh organic squash I buy every week, and so I think about the things I buy. They have a lot of breads, they have foods that are made organically. It's not perfect, because for example, the people that bake bread, you can't buy organic baking powder here. So there are, but I'd say it's as close as we're going to get to what we should be doing and have availability of it here at Lakeside. I want to add a parenthetical note before I forget about that. Tianguis, bring your own canvas bags or baskets. No plastic bags to hand out things in. Oh, it's at the La Huerta Eventos, which is just west of town, just west of the cemetery. If you keep going, oh, wrong direction. West. That must have risen over there. Okay. Yeah, so go west, past the cemetery just a little ways. And there's a big sign on the top that says La Huerta Eventos. And if you don't get there at 10, you will have to park, in Lubbock, Texas. So, okay, so what are the other reasons for besides protecting your body, for buying organic? I'd say the best reason is to support organic architecture. Listen to this. You can tell I taught for a while. Organic farming. A market for organic farming means farmers will do it, and farmers growing without pesticides means we aren't running herbicides and pesticides into the lake. There's no chemical runoff, so the next generation of Mexican babies won't begin their lives with bodies full of poisons from their mother's milk, or begin their lives with food feeding their neurobiology with the wrong things and challenging their lives for a lifetime. We as Americans, Canadians, and Europeans have such a presence in this beautiful place that we can indeed influence future generations by our buying decisions, by organic purchases. And we can make their life safer from physical harm simply by buying organic whenever it's available. And then, of course, there's our own health. And which ones should we be buying as a priority? The ones that are most absorbent of pesticides are peaches and celery. Now, we don't have peaches at the Organic Farmers Market. I have a peach tree in my backyard that we're struggling to get to produce peaches big enough to eat. We have a lot of peaches, they're pretty little, we're working on it. But celery, there is organic celery at the Tianguis, at the Organic Tianguis. Apples are second on that list. We don't have organic apples either, so I wash them and peel them. Leafy greens I've talked to you about. The carrots are very high on the list. We have carrots in our garden, they're easy to grow. Fresh berries, there are going to be organic berries soon at Jaime's, and I think he's going to sell some to the Tianguis as well. So we'll have organic berries very soon. They have organic meat and eggs at the Tianguis, and they're very important, not only because they don't give us unwanted hormones and antibiotics, but they also, organic animals are not allowed to be fed with the remains of dead animals, which was the cause of the mad cow epidemic. Mexican farmers are not forbidden from that practice, but all American farmers, European Union farmers, and all organic farmers around the world are forbidden from that practice. So it's a very protective thing to eat organic meats. In inorganic meats, there are also two pretty frightening chemicals. One is ivermectin, an animal wormer linked to neurological damage in humans. Another is Flunix, an anti-inflammatory given to animals that increases intestinal problems in humans. And I would just say, as a sort of a footnote to this organic food thing, we have to stop focusing so much land and grain on feeding cattle and instead use it to feed people. So now you have a lot of reasons for buying organic, and I'm going to move on to the sticky question of the moment, GMOs. So how many of you are fairly conflicted about what to do about GMOs? Yeah, see, it took me a long time to get onto this bandwagon too. I looked at, sometimes it's called GE, by the way, genetic engineering as well as genetic modification of organisms. So I looked at this and I thought about it just from logic. I I tend to try to wait for peer-reviewed science to find out whether I believe in something or not. Or if my intuition is really powerful about it, like poison on my skin absorbing into it and killing something, then I can make that decision by myself. But GMOs, I was kind of thinking, we've hybridized plants for a long time. The hybridized plants are a form of genetic engineering. And I saw pictures of women in Mexico with their corn. They take the biggest ear with the healthiest corn on it and they make it their seed. That's sensible. That's a way of genetic engineering. We also have something called pluots that are half plums and half apricots because of that. We have our tree in our backyard that's sort of like a mango papaya. Huge giant ones that are sweet and silky like mangoes but taste like papaya a little bit. Anyway, these genetic engineering things can be really positive. So I was a little conflicted about this and I couldn't decide what to do. And I want to tell you as a parenthetical thing to that even though that kind of genetic modification seems totally okay to me, I recently learned from a nationally known pathologist in California, Johann Holton, who's been studying the origins of wheat and who actually went to Turkey and got a piece of the original wheat, 7,000 years old. He said that the continual genetic modifications of wheat throughout the last 4 decades may be the reason that people are so allergic to the current, much more gluten-rich varieties. The outgrowth of this, he thinks, is this massive increase in celiac disease, also known as gluten sensitivity. So maybe modifying plants isn't so great for humans after all, even though it's natural. But the passionate debate of the last few years, which resulted in towns like Mendocino, California banning GMO and the Prop 37 on the voting ballot in California last month, was because of the way it's happening now. And genetic modification is being done or proposed by huge companies that sell both chemicals like Roundup and seed. And they're doing it for what I think is all the wrong reasons. They're genetically modifying their seed so that it can be planted in the soil that has been soaked in Roundup. Now, so I look at it and say, do I need studies to tell me I don't want to do this? I don't want to eat something that's soaked in Roundup, the seed is soaked in Roundup? So that when Monsanto is sued about this, they say, oh, but we've done studies and it doesn't hurt the growth of the crop. Are we missing the point here again? What about the people who eat the crop? That's me. I don't think I want to eat this. And I really don't think I have to wait for studies to tell me not to buy stuff that's soaked in Roundup in the ground. So that's GMO. So, and you know what? The worst effect is on children. Because children eat everything of corn, beginning with breakfast cereal, right? So how many of you have grandchildren that come to visit? Yeah, every hand. So let me tell you, cereals labeled certified organic do not have GMO corn in them. Cereals that are labeled natural probably do. In the US, almost everything is GMO corn now. The cereals that are really awful are Corn Flakes, Corn Chex, O's, Barbara's Puffins, Kellogg's Pops, Cocoa Puffs, Frosted Flakes, and Heart to Heart Kashi. Don't buy these for your grandchildren when they come to visit. You do not want to poison them to thank them for their visit to Mexico. A few of these are labeled gluten-free, and even if you have celiac, don't buy them. Beware of that label natural on anything. It's a cover-up for not doing organic and making people buy it anyway. So don't do that. Make sure everything that's in a box that has grains in it says certified organic. And they do have those at Super Lake and Costco. Sadly, the U.S. remains the rare holdout in the world to allow food manufacturers to conceal their use of GMOs. India has finally legally prohibited Monsanto from importing GMO seed. Many European countries have, and the European Union as a whole is probably going to do this within the next few months. Yet, in America, these corporations have huge power. However, we Nebraska farmers, I guess, in spite of their power, we have a few guts in Nebraska, because in spite of their power, we're suing Monsanto, the organic farming organization. Not because of the health effects. I mean, it'd be nice to sue them for that. But what we're suing them for is they had the bloody gall to come to a field of an organic farmer in eastern Nebraska and test his wheat, and they found a bit of their chemical in his wheat. So they sued him to force him to pay them for the seed he had planted and to stop being organic and to use Monsanto seed. We said, okay, that's it. You're not going to do that to organic farmers. This kind of harassment has caused what's estimated to be the death of 5,000 farmers in India. They were doing this, they were going to farmers in India and finding residue in their crop when they had not bought seed from Monsanto. And then they were charging them thousands of dollars, and they couldn't do it. So they were killing themselves. And finally the Indian government has awakened and says, okay, no more of that, and they've banned GMO. Here in Mexico, it's been banned for generations. They can't bring GMO. But it appeared for a while that one of the last acts of the Calderon administration would be reversing its stance on the prohibition of Monsanto seed and acceptance of it. However, good news, on November 24th, the Secretary of Agriculture announced the decision would be postponed until spring, handing off this hot potato to Peña Nieto. However, here's what they propose to do. Monsanto and Dow AgroSciences, the world's 8th largest seed company, and DuPont have applied to the government for planting 2.5 million hectares, 6 million acres, that's the size of El Salvador, guys, of GMO maize in various parts of Mexico, particularly Tamaulipas. This would be really bad, not just because of the pesticides involved in soaking the soil, but Mexico is sort of a global repository of maize genetic diversity. And if this GMO plan is approved, it would mark the world's first commercial scale planting of GMO varieties of a major food crop in its center of origin. So genetic contamination of 7,000 years of development of Mexican peasant varieties would be inevitable, and it will be a serious threat to Yucatan's honey production. The whistle on this was blown by Elena Alvarez Buya, an investigator for the Ecological Institute of UNAM and president of Mexican Union of Concerned Scientists, the organization my husband worked for many years. Several scientific organizations have applied to the United Nations, various divisions of the United Nations, especially the Convention on Biological Diversity, to try and stop this. I'll continue to follow this, and environmental activists all over Mexico are protesting. There have been really, really big protests outside of the agriculture building in Mexico City. So hopefully they'll hear this, and hopefully the information will get to them that, you know, if India's banned it and Europe's banned it, maybe you guys should pay attention. So as a sort of side note to all this, I want to give you a little black humor. A recent notice was posted in the employees' cafeteria at Monsanto. Quote, "We have removed, as far as practicable, GM soya and maize from all food products served in our restaurants. We have taken the above steps to ensure that you, the consumer, can feel confident in the food we serve." Company spokesman Tony Coombs confirmed this. He said, "We believe in choice." This would be the same choice they don't want to give the Mexican farmers, right? Or the Nebraska farmers. Another piece of black noir here is that the Chinese political elite enjoy the safest of foods. Organic produce grown in Beijing in a huge organic farm surrounded by a 6-foot spiked fence with security personnel guarding it. Organic grass-fed beef from Inner Mongolia, and rice free of pesticides, chemicals, or GMOs. The rulers obviously know the truth about the dangers of these things in their food. Meanwhile, the Chinese babies get formula laced with plastics, melatonin, remember that mess? And adults are dying from tainted liquor made from corn with pesticides in it. So the Chinese government rushes to reassure us. They say, but the public can buy the small remaining balance of organic rice in China at 15 times the cost of regular rice. Oh, thank you so much. So yet another reason to eat organic is to support organic farmers who are fighting these huge chemical companies that are causing dangerous bioaccumulation of pesticides and poisonous chemicals throughout the world. Back to the U.S., a little good news and a little bad news. As of 2011, 11% of fruits and vegetables consumed in the U.S. were organically grown. I think that's fabulous, don't you? 11%, okay. Well, the bad news is that the USDA budget, U.S. Department of Agriculture budget for research into agriculture gives 1% to organic farming and 99% to enhancing industrial agriculture. There's something a little wrong with this. So all of you from farm states, if you just send 3 words to your congressman or call on the phone, give 3 words, support organic agriculture. For every phone call, it represents 100 constituents. Every letter represents 100 constituents. Think about it and see if you can help by doing that. You can see I have a biased opinion on this subject for a whole lot of reasons. Supporting small organic farms. But I also believe, for all the reasons I've given you, that organic is the healthy way to go. We must, in a world with a warming climate, which you heard about 2 weeks ago from my husband, learn how to farm more sustainably, like we're learning how to build more sustainably. So for health reasons and to support organic agriculture, for the sake of future generations here and around the lake, as well as throughout the world, buy organic, eat organic. And one last word, don't eat anything your great-grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, are there people that might have a question or two? Okay. Use the mic.
What about Brazil?
Oh, I knew you'd ask something I didn't know. Well, what particularly about Brazil?
Moment. Let everybody hear.
Brazil is a growing agriculture center.
Yes. I haven't heard that they've banned GMO. I know they grow a lot of sugar cane for ethanol. That's good. I'll check on that, Danny, and I'll get back to you by email. Any other questions?
And that is being genetically modified to increase the fuel production.
Well, if somebody uses it for fuel, I really don't care.
Yeah,
But it's when I eat it that I care. I don't know. Well, that's...
If you can tell the difference.
Yeah, well, if they sold it, I guess. I think their main market, I don't think they sell a lot of sugarcane from Brazil. I think mostly they use it for ethanol. Alan.
Pia, first off, thank you so much. This was excellent.
Welcome.
The dilemma of scorpions and other insects that also harm and kill,
Yeah.
are there safe pesticides that we can properly use in our homes against this kind of a situation?
Yeah. People asked me this last year. I talked about indoor air quality and the relationship of pesticides. And one of the things I said was never fumigate your house. Because everything inside your house, after you fumigate it, when you come back, every single surface you touch has molecules of that pesticide, which is why the critters die. But it also means it gets on your skin, it gets in you. So don't do that. Scorpions usually don't come around unless you're someplace where the ground is disturbed. We had 2 when we were building our little passive solar casita, and we've never had any since. In the areas that are fairly urban, you don't see a lot of them. And the only thing I know to do for them, frankly, is step on them. And just keep your shoes in shoe closets, keep your rugs clean, keep your house floors clean, so you can see them. The other animal, everything else you can handle with some kind of something. I don't know what to do about scorpions. That's my only unanswered question. With cockroaches that are prevalent, we'll get to you next. First you caulk around all the plumbing openings coming into the house. You put a cover over your shower drain, rubber cover over it. And then you use boric acid, powdered boric acid, that you sprinkle. If you ever see one, every now and then I see one in my house. I just get out the little powdered boric acid and I put it where I saw the cockroach. And powdered boric acid scratches their coats and they bleed to death. So you find them upside down on the floor the next day. But it gets rid of all of them. I do not have a problem. Spiders I encourage. I take them outside if I don't like them. But I encourage because they eat all kinds of other bad things. When I was in the kitchen once in Dallas, about 15 or 20 years ago, I was washing dishes and I heard this buzzing behind me. And I kept looking around, I couldn't find it. And finally I turned off the water, put down my dishes, and tracked it down. And under the corner of my cabinet, a spider had a web. She had caught a wasp. And she was wrapping him up. And he would buzz and fight, and she would back off and wait. And then when he stopped fighting, she'd run up and wrap around him some more. And then he'd start buzzing and fighting, and she'd back off. And I watched this whole thing. I was fascinated. So at that point I said, oh yeah, spiders are really great, I like spiders. So,
Jill,
We're good with that.
Gabriella?
Thanks very much, first of all, great information. I have a few questions. A lot of us are from Canada. I'd like to know if you know if GMOs have been banned in Canada. You talked about Europe and India.
yes, I did talk about that, and I don't know the answer. So why don't you find out for us?
I will. Thank you. The second question I have is we actually have a farm in Ontario, and we have a lot of hornets' nests. Can you recommend anything on that?
Plow them under,
Plow them under.
plow them under.
That's it.
Yeah.
There seems to be a belief, I don't know how prevalent it is, but that here in Mexico, at least locally, that many of the Mexican farmers are too poor to afford expensive pesticides and herbicides, and therefore much of the produce that's available is less ridden with herbicides and pesticides. Do you believe there's any truth in that?
I've heard that too. Yeah. I think the smaller farmers, that's probably true.
So does that mean that the produce that we get at Walmart or wherever has less pesticide and herbicide in it?
You'd have to find out where they get it from. I'm guessing Walmart probably doesn't buy too much local produce. Just guessing, I don't know the answer for sure. All of this, you realize that all of this is you kind of test it as you go. You know, all of us have to ask as many questions as we can. We have to use our logic. So we have to go into Walmart to the produce guy and say, where does this come from? And often they have boxes that they unload, and you can look on the box and it tells you. So big agriculture rules at Walmart as far as I know. So, you know, if they buy stuff locally, it would be great, but I just doubt it, although I'm not sure.
I
Okay?
have one here.
Where's here? Oh, over there.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the cure for ants is, because we get them under, I can kill 30 or 40 with my fingers. I go outside, if I can find a nest, sometimes they're in the open. I
Hold
spray,
your mic
kill the
close.
whole
Hold your
nest.
mic so people.
Kill the whole nest.
Ants, okay?
You gotta hold the mic.
No, don't kill them with pesticides. Here's the deal with ants. The little tiny sugar ants in your kitchen will not cross powdered cinnamon. So get a big jar of powdered cinnamon at Costco. It's not expensive. And then sprinkle it. Try to track them to where they're coming in. And then sprinkle cinnamon there. They won't come in. That's the end of that. They will not cross it. And ants outside, I don't care. That's their territory. All I don't want them is in my kitchen. I don't want them in my house. We have flat, we're on a one-story house, we have some flat doorways with no thresholds. So at one point we had ants taking a shortcut from the hallway that is outdoors. And they were going into the bathroom of the guest room and through the guest room to the outdoors. It was their shortcut. So we put cinnamon in the doorway on both ends, and that was the end of that. So cinnamon for ants, yes.
The boric acid that you mentioned earlier, the powder, is very effective on the ants too.
I didn't have success with that.
I did. I have over for years now.
Okay, good.
We have another one right
Yeah,
here.
okay.
We have another one
Wait,
right
we're supposed
here.
to do
Let
this.
her go.
Okay.
I would like to know, like Clorox, is that a bad thing? And Pine Sol? I have, my maid says if you mix Clorox and Pine Sol, it kills, and it sounds horrible to me, so I haven't done it, but
No. What does she want to do with it?
she kills scorpions.
All you have to do is step on them.
Well, I step on them, I cut their tails off first so they can't dig through.
Wow, you're... So basically, Clorox has chlorine in it, and when you mix it with other stuff that has soap, it releases chlorine gas that's so toxic to people. It's one of the most toxic things you can breathe. Remember the Bhopal thing? Chlorine gas in the environment? It's horrible. Don't ever mix Clorox with anything that's soapy, ever. So no, don't mix Clorox with Pine Sol. And you know, use vinegar and water to clean your floors, not Clorox, because Clorox goes into the water table and it poisons all of us. Don't use that stuff. If we're sick, I let her use chlorine to clean the bathrooms. That's it. Okay, next question.
Yeah, we have some beautiful rose stems, but they don't have any leaves on
Because
them.
the cutter ants got us.
Well, if you were to find a cutter ant nest, which we've gone out at night, there's millions of them, what do you put on the nest to get rid of those things besides those poisonous pellets?
Drown them. Don finds the hole and he sticks a hose in it and he turns it on.
great bubbles of air come out, keep coming out.
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
wait a minute, so
Wait,
everybody
let
can
him tell you,
hear.
because he's the guy who did this at our house.
Well, you want to set the hose so that it can go continuously into the hole. Periodically, great bubbles of air come out as their chambers are beginning to fill up. And after they all fill up, the nest is gone.
And they leave. They go, sometimes they move like, how far away they moved down by the fence. So they moved 100 yards.
They move laterally.
100 yards away, and then we had to do it again. But at least it's not toxic. It doesn't hurt anything. I sort of feel guilty using water for that, but on the other hand, it goes back into the lake, because we're pretty close to the lake. It goes in the water table and into the lake without contaminating anything. Now, Jaime, who has the greenhouse, has another tack for that. I keep trying it, but it never gets to succeed because my husband floods them out first. So I can't tell you if it works for me, but it works for Jaime, who's a wonderful organic farmer. He takes a banana, a really ripe banana, and rolls it in cornmeal and yeast and puts it near the nest. And he said it takes about 2 weeks, but the yeast causes the queen to blow up. So that's another tack for that. Okay, other questions?
Marguerite.
Yes.
Hi, Pia.
Marguerite.
Three. One, if you folks have not seen a DVD called Food Inc., do get a hold of it and watch it.
Yes, I agree. Food Inc. And it's available at the Tiegas. It's really good.
Number two, I have lived on the south side of the lake where there is a lot of farming. For the person who asked about herbicides and pesticides being used to raise their crops, the answer is yes, they do. And so do the people in Tizapan El Alto. So that's information. The larger farmers are using pesticides and herbicides. The berry growers. There's only 2 berry growers on that whole south side that are organic. Only.
And we have
All
some of
the
those.
rest.
We have some of those berries at the organic Tiegas from the organic
Yeah.
farm.
Yeah, so that's the information that I can give you
Thank you
from
so much.
personal experience.
Okay, thank you so much, Marguerite.
You're on.
This is
Thank
a lady
you.
you can
Appreciate
trust.
that.
Okay, Leo. Hi.
I'm beginning to feel like a persona non grata back here.
Well, you shouldn't sit so far back.
I have my pooch with me, that's why. A question, something that's been in my mind for a while, and everything that I've heard, certainly easy to apply in my home garden or in a neighborhood garden. But let's think of the state of Iowa, for example. You know, mass plantations, right? How can you apply these principles and still feed Chicago and New York City and Moscow and London and everything else? I don't understand how you can scale this to feed civilization as we know it today.
It's difficult.
Well, is it done anywhere? Is there a way?
It certainly is. There are what's known as cooperative farms. And if you, where did I find that? There's a wonderful film called Farmer John. Oh, it's called The Truth About Farmer John. And it details his change from regular agriculture to commercial scale pesticide-free farming and how he's succeeded. He's in Clinton, Illinois, which is on the border of Wisconsin, and people come from Chicago and buy pieces of the farm. And at the beginning, he had just a certain number of acres, and he needed more, so the people that were in his co-op got together and bought the land next door to expand, and that's how they're doing it. They're expanding and expanding. And people are getting organic produce from his farm. He's growing organic corn. He's one of the great teachers of how to grow organic corn that's successful on a large scale. So it is happening, and this is why we need the USDA to spend more than 1% of their budget on organic farming. That's what we need it for. So please send the note, support organic farming, to your congressmen and senators.
We're going to have time for 3 more questions, and then we're going to stop, and the people who want to can talk to Pia afterwards.
Just a quick comment.
Oh, yeah. Wait.
The DVD is available at the Tuesday Farmers Market.
The Farmers John DVD?
Yes.
Oh, good.
I got it there.
Okay, good. So, Don wants me to reassure you, I grow organic wheat. So I have more organic wheat on my farm than the neighbor does that uses chemicals. I produce a greater quantity, and the farm agriculture agent from our local USDA office came out And he couldn't believe it. We're getting great yields, and we're totally pure and organic. We're getting better yield than the other guys. And they have weeds that are coming up in their Roundup soil that are now chemical resistant. I have no weeds. My land is wonderful. So they're looking at this. They're saying, well, maybe there's something wrong with this program. Because if you farm right, you don't get weeds, you don't get bugs, you don't have problems. The wheat is resistant to these things by itself.
Okay, here.
My question is, I have a small balcony, and last year I had 4 pots of petunias. They were covered with little tiny white flies. I used soap and water.
Yes.
I had to turn over each leaf where the
Yes.
eggs were.
Yes.
It took me over an hour to do these 4 pots.
Yes.
The next morning, they were back. This year, I did not plant petunias. Can you help me?
Okay, yes, I can help you, and all of you who have white flies. The mix is, there's a neem oil you buy at the organic Tiangas, NEEM. It's a natural tree bark oil. You take 1 tablespoon, Dina, are you here? Dina Hafker? Yeah, anyway, Dina, they sell neem oil, and you take 1 tablespoon of soap, of insecticide soap, to 1 gallon of water. You add to that a 1/4 cup of neem oil and a tablespoon of baking soda so it sticks to the leaves, and you spray that on your plants. No more white flies.
Okay, we have one here.
Insecticide soap or just soap and water? You can use soap and water.
Hold it close.
If you want to know about a great organic gardening, all you have to do is refer back, courtesy of the U.S. government 50 years ago, when we boycotted sending things to Cuba, one of which being fertilizer. So Cuba has massive, massive organic gardens because we forced them, and they're also the best mechanics on the planet because they're still driving cars from 1954. You freaked me out when you said heart-to-heart kashi was not good, because I used to have that at least a couple mornings a week in my San Francisco law office. I thought kashi was one of the good guys.
Well, it would be if they didn't use GMO in it, so. There's another question back there. I was going to say something and I forgot. Oh, this is my life these days. It'll come back to me.
I'd like to make 2 comments.
Where are you?
I'm right here.
Okay.
Stand, please.
I'd like to make 2 comments. I spent my entire life in agro-industry, basically in flour milling overseas in South America and in the grain export business. One of the things that is behind the use of GMOs, and your question about Brazil. Brazil, at least in some parts, is growing GMOs, but they certify exports to Europe as non-GMO. But the biggest thing is that GMOs are going to places like African developing countries because they want the yields. The United States is big on getting yields. The maize is going into ethanol. These things. This is a commercial thing driven not only by the chemical companies, it's driven by the grain exporters and by government interests in having export of different grains.
Exactly right.
And the other footnote I wanted to make was that in the First World War, nerve gas was chlorine.
No gas was what?
Nerve gas
Oh, nerve gas was, yeah.
was chlorine.
That's why I said don't ever mix Clorox with soap, because that's what you'll get, nerve gas.
Okay, we only have time for one more question during this session, so here it is.
I was wondering
about
the...
There are 2 people, so we're going to take both your questions. Relax, it's okay. Jim will let you take, I'll take 2 more questions.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering about...
Hold the mic directly in front of your mouth. No, this way. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering about pyrethium that is from the painted daisies, and if that was an exception to the pesticide rule or not.
It started out being a good thing and ended up not being a good thing for various reasons, neurotoxins among them. We used to think that was a good deal, that it was going to be natural.
Okay, I grew up in Nebraska, eastern Nebraska, on a farm. I remember my father scooping the barn out, the manure out, and spreading it on the fields.
Yes.
That's how he did it back then.
Yes.
Then I think he started using more efficient ways, and he said, we don't have as many birds as we used to have. But I'm wondering, what part of Nebraska are you from?
Sydney.
Okay.
Western Nebraska, on the border of Colorado. My grandfather homesteaded land in both states, and when he found out it was 2 states and he had to pay taxes in 2 states, he sold off all the Colorado part, and now they have wind turbines on it. But I can't get on my Nebraska land because Nebraska is so conservative. Anyway, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, thank you.
But the manure issue, when I came here first and we started our organic farm, I had our gardener buy a bunch of organic manure, and it was goat manure, and I thought that was a really good idea, right? Wrong. It has weeds in it like you can't imagine. And I'm still pulling up those weeds 6 years later. So don't use goat manure. Use compost that you make yourself. How many of you compost in this audience? I should see every hand. Take everything that's food scrap, no meat, no dairy, no chicken, no fish, but everything else, just put a pot on your kitchen counter that has a tight-fitting lid. Put all that stuff that's food scraps in that pot. Go out in your backyard, make a pile, and mix grass clippings with that and stir it once in a while. Make sure it's wet in the dry season. And in a year, you'll have the most beautiful compost in the world you can mix in your own garden. You don't have to buy anybody's anything. But they do have organic compost at the Organic Changas if you don't have enough. Okay, you guys, thank you so much. I love doing this, and I love your business in organic. Thank you. Oh, wait, we have a handout in front. Stand up, Danny and Eileen. Danny has the list of GMO plants to watch out for. You can come get that handout. Eileen has the one on the Stanford study and an article in the New Yorker, so come and get them if you want. They will hand them to you. I'll have Danny stand on that side and Eileen on this side, so there's not a rush.